The night was colder than anything Ethan had ever known. He had fought in deserts, marched through jungles, and crossed dead cities filled with smoke and dust, but nothing compared to the endless ice storm of this world. The wind cut like knives. The snow was so heavy he could not see more than a few steps ahead, and his body felt weaker with every passing minute. His ship was gone, burned in the crash, his crew scattered or dead. He had tried to walk toward the mountains he had seen from the air, but soon the storm swallowed him whole. The blizzard howled louder, and the freezing air filled his lungs until even breathing was pain. Ethan knew he would not survive the night alone. Then through the swirling storm he saw it, a dim orange glow, flickering against the white walls of snow. A campfire, maybe a shelter, or maybe only his imagination, but his numb legs carried him toward it, because even if it was a trap, death in the cold was worse. The glow became clearer, and soon he saw the outline of a small tent pressed against the side of a frozen rock. The fabric was heavy, built for war zones, not for simple camping. Someone was already inside. He realized for a second he thought it might be another human survivor. But when the flap opened, he froze. Standing in the doorway was a tall figure, armored in dark plates scratched by battle, her skin a pale shade of silver, her eyes burning like amber fire. Ethan's breath caught. She was not human. She was one of them. The enemy species his people had been fighting for years. An alien warrior. Her gaze studied him, sharp and dangerous. And for a moment he expected her to reach for a weapon. But instead her voice came low and rough. Carried by the storm. "You will die out there," she said. "Come inside. Or the cold will take you." Ethan's mind screamed no. Every soldier's instinct told him never to trust the enemy. But his body was already failing. He could not feel his hands. His face burned with frost, his legs felt like stone. He stepped forward, too weak to resist. The tent was small, cramped, and filled with a faint heat from a portable heater glowing in the corner. It was nothing compared to the blizzard outside, but inside felt like life itself. Ethan sank to the floor, his chest heaving, ice melting on his coat. The alien woman sat across from him, watching, her amber eyes unblinking. "Why did you save me?" Ethan asked at last, his voice raw. She tilted her head, the movement slow, almost like a predator studying prey. "Because only a fool lets life go to waste," she said. "Even if that life belongs to my enemy." Ethan felt a chill crawl up his spine that had nothing to do with the storm. She spoke of him as if he was not a man but a puzzle. He wanted to ask her name, but pride held his tongue. He was a soldier, a human soldier, and she was the enemy. Hours passed in silence. Broken only by the storm screaming outside, Ethan tried to rest, but he could not. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt her eyes on him, watching, measuring. The air was tense, filled with something unspoken. Finally, the heater gave a weak buzz. The power almost gone. The warmth faded quickly, the cold creeping back inside the tent like a hungry animal. Ethan shivered, teeth chattering. The alien woman looked at him once more, then shifted closer, her voice like iron. "If you want to live," she said, "you must stay near me." Ethan blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. "Near you?" he repeated. Her eyes narrowed and she gave a sharp nod. "This tent is too small, the heat too little. Alone we will freeze, but together our bodies can fight the cold." Ethan's throat went dry. The idea sounded insane, impossible, but at the same time, survival made every choice simple. He was too weak, too close to death, and he knew she was right. Still, the thought of lying so close to the enemy made his blood run colder than the storm itself. But when he looked at her again, there was no hesitation in her face. Only certainty. To her, this was not a request. It was survival. And deep inside, a part of Ethan feared something more than the cold. The feeling that sharing a tent with this stranger was about to change his life forever. The storm outside grew worse, its howl shaking the fabric of the tent. Snow pressed hard against the thin walls, and the heater gave one last flicker before dying with a soft hiss. Darkness filled the small space, and the cold slipped back inside like a predator hungry for weak flesh. Ethan's body shook violently, his teeth chattering, his breath fogging the air in short bursts. He tried to pull his coat tighter, but the frost had already soaked through. The fabric stiff like ice across from him. The alien woman sat perfectly still, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Like embers refusing to die, she did not shiver, though frost clung to her armor, though her breath also smoked in the air. Finally, she moved closer, her presence heavy. her voice cutting through the storm like a blade. "Alone you will not last the night," she said. "You must come here close or you will be dead by morning." Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. He had trained to fight her kind, not to share breath in a space so small it felt like a coffin. Her species was known for brutal raids, for merciless combat, for the scars they left on human colonies, and now she wanted him to lie beside her, skin to skin, as if they were allies. No, as if they were something even closer. "I don't need your help," Ethan whispered, his voice shaky, his pride still clinging like the last spark of fire, but his trembling body betrayed him. His knees weak, his fingers numb. The alien woman leaned nearer, her face close enough for him to see the lines of old scars running across her silver skin. Her eyes narrowed, and she spoke again, colder than the storm itself. "Then die, human. But do not waste my heat when I could save myself." The words cut deeper than the cold. For a long moment, Ethan hesitated, caught between pride and survival. But when another violent shiver racked his body, he knew deep inside that pride was a luxury of the living. He forced himself to move closer, the space between them shrinking until he could feel her body radiating heat. At first it was unbearable. Her scent was strange, sharp and metallic. Like steel after battle, her skin, even through her armor, seemed alive with a warmth that spread across him. He tried to keep his distance, to stay stiff, but the cold was stronger. Slowly, without meaning to, he leaned against her, and she did not pull away. The silence in the tent grew heavier. Outside, the storm roared, but inside, only the sound of their breaths filled the dark. Each breath, each heartbeat seemed louder than gunfire. Ethan felt as if the tent had shrunk, as if the whole frozen planet now existed only in this small, suffocating space. "Why are you really helping me?" he asked, his voice low, almost afraid of the answer. The alien woman's head tilted slightly, her glowing eyes never leaving his. "In my people's law," she said, "to share warmth in the storm is not a small thing, it is a bond, a promise stronger than blood." Ethan's stomach tightened, his pulse racing. "A promise?" he whispered. "Yes," she replied, her tone steady. "Where I come from, it means mate, it means fate. It means your life is now tied to mine." The words struck Ethan harder than the cold. He pulled back slightly, shaking his head. "I didn't agree to that," he said, his voice sharp, her gaze hardened, fierce and unyielding. "You did when you stepped inside my tent. You did when you touched my warmth. The storm chose for us both." Ethan felt trapped, not by the tent, not by the storm, but by the weight of her words. He wanted to argue, to fight. But his body was too weak, and deep down, a part of him feared she was right. The storm had forced them together, and in this frozen hell, survival meant trust, even if trust came at a price he could not understand. Hours passed, the night long and merciless. Ethan drifted between shallow sleep and half-conscious shivering, each time waking to find himself closer to her. Her arm had wrapped around him at some point, pulling him against her chest, her body heat sinking into his frozen bones. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong, that she was the enemy, and yet his body no longer fought it, his mind too tired to resist as the storm raged. Ethan realized something that shook him more than the cold. It was not just survival anymore, it was something else. A strange pull, a bond he did not ask for but could not deny. And though he told himself it was only the cold that made him stay close, deep inside a shadow of truth whispered louder. This was the beginning of something he could not escape. The storm finally began to quiet, though the cold inside the tent was still sharp as knives. Ethan opened his eyes to find himself pressed against the alien woman, her arm firm across his chest, her warmth the only reason he was still alive. For a moment he lay frozen, not from the cold, but from the realization of how close they were. He had trained all his life to fight her kind, but now his survival depended on her heartbeat against his back. Slowly she stirred, her golden eyes opening, glowing faintly in the dim light of morning snow. Her gaze did not soften when it met his. It was steady, unblinking, filled with something that felt more like judgment than kindness. "You lived," she said, her voice low and certain. "That means the bond is sealed." Ethan pushed away, confusion and anger mixing in his chest. "What bond?" he demanded. "I never agreed to anything." The alien woman sat up, her movements graceful and sharp like a blade drawn from its sheath. She touched the scars on her own chest as if they were proof, then looked at him again. "In my people's law, the act is older than war, older than empires. When two beings share warmth to survive the cold, they become as one, their fates tied together, their blood bound in spirit. Ethan shook his head, laughing bitterly, though there was no humor in the sound. That's just your superstition, he said. I only did it because I didn't want to freeze. Her eyes narrowed, the faintest growl in her throat. You think this is choice, human? The storm does not care for your pride. It chooses who survives. And it has chosen us. He wanted to argue more, to throw her words back in her face, but part of him knew she believed everyone. And stranger still, part of him feared she might be right. Because something inside him had shifted. Something he could not name. Even now, sitting apart from her, he could still feel the ghost of her warmth, as if it clung to his skin, refusing to let go. Listen, Ethan said carefully, trying to hold on to logic. I have a duty, a war to fight. I can't just accept being, whatever you think this makes us. The alien leaned closer, her expression fierce but calm. You think the war matters out here? She asked. Look around you, soldier, there is no army. No command, only ice, only death, only me. Her words cut deeper than he wanted to admit. In the silence that followed, the wind outside seemed weaker, yet the weight of her gaze pressed harder against him than any storm. For the first time he felt the truth. Out here, far from fleets and flags, the war meant nothing. Survival was the only law, and she had already tied that survival to him. Tell me your name, she said suddenly, her voice softer, almost demanding yet curious. Ethan hesitated, then answered. Ethan. She repeated it slowly, her tongue shaping the word strangely. Ethan. Then she touched her chest. I am Koresh. The name rolled heavy in the air. Strong and unfamiliar, Ethan found himself staring at her, not as an enemy, not even as a savior, but as something far stranger. And when she spoke again, his blood ran cold. By speaking our names, the bond is complete, now you are mine, and I am yours. He wanted to deny it, to laugh, to call it nonsense. But her voice carried a weight he could not shake. The way she said it was not ritual, not tradition. It was truth to her, unbreakable, undeniable, and part of him feared that the universe itself had already accepted it. The tent grew quiet again, the silence almost unbearable. Ethan stared at the snow gathering against the fabric, but his mind was not on the storm anymore. It was on Koresh, on the strange fire in her eyes, on the way his body still carried her warmth like a memory etched into flesh. He told himself it was survival, nothing more, but deep inside, another voice whispered. Survival had already become something else. Koresh leaned back, her expression unreadable, but her words sharp as ever. You may deny it, but your blood knows, your spirit knows in time. Even you will see, Ethan clenched his fists, fighting against the strange pull inside his chest. He was human. She was alien. Enemies carved by war. And yet here, trapped in the cold, they were something neither side could ever understand. Bound not by choice, not by orders, but by the storm itself. And as the wind outside began to rise again, Ethan felt a deep unease grow inside him, because he realized that whatever this bonding ritual truly meant, it was no longer just her belief. It was becoming his reality too. The storm broke at last, leaving the world in eerie silence. The white plains stretched endless, sharp ice ridges rising like teeth, the sky still heavy with pale clouds. Inside the tent, Ethan sat awake, his mind restless, his body stiff from cold and from the closeness he tried to forget. Koresh sharpened a blade with steady hands, her face calm, her golden eyes never leaving her task. Ethan could not escape her words from the night before. Bonded, fates tied together, she had said. It still felt impossible. Yet the weight of her belief pressed against him. He told himself again and again that survival was the only reason he stayed. But a whisper inside him kept asking if that was still true. Suddenly, Koresh stopped moving. Her head tilting, her body tense, Ethan froze, sensing the change in her before hearing it himself. A faint hum carried on the wind, low but growing, unnatural against the silence of the frozen world. Her eyes narrowed and she whispered one word. Drones. Ethan's heart raced. His instincts snapping awake, he crawled toward the tent flap, lifting it just enough to see the outside. Dark shapes moved across the snow, small at first, then clearer as they drew near. Metal shells, glowing red sensors sweeping across the plains. Search units. Hunters programmed to find survivors and finish what the crash had started. They're not human, Ethan muttered, his throat tight. Not ours, Koresh rose, pulling her blade free, her body moving like a shadow. No, she said. They belong to the Syndicate. Machines that serve neither you nor me. They kill all who live. The sound grew louder, the hum turning into a sharp mechanical buzz. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears, every instinct screaming to run, but where could they run? With the ice stretching endless in every direction, he looked at Koresh. She did not look afraid, only ready. The calm in her eyes chilled him more than the storm ever had. The first drone came into view, crawling across the snow on 4 sharp legs, its sensor beam cutting across the white ground. Ethan reached for the small sidearm at his belt. Fingers numb but steady, Koresh gave him a sharp glance. "One shot and they will all come," she hissed. Ethan swallowed hard, lowering the weapon. Though his grip tightened, the drone moved closer. Its beam sliding across the tent wall, Ethan held his breath, praying the fabric would shield them. But the machine stopped, its head tilting, as if it sensed life hidden inside. Koresh moved in an instant. Faster than he thought possible, she slipped out through the flap, silent as shadow, her blade flashing once. The drone sparked, its body collapsing into the snow. Ethan's chest tightened. The strike was perfect, deadly, silent. But the glow of the machine's sensor flickered one last time before it died, sending a pulse into the frozen air. Moments later, more hums echoed across the plains. Louder, closer, Koresh ducked back into the tent. Her jaw clenched. They know they are coming. Ethan grabbed his pack, his voice urgent. Then we can't stay here. They'll tear this tent apart. Koresh nodded once. Fierce and certain, she pulled him toward the flap, her grip firm on his arm. Together, they stepped out into the endless white. The cold hit Ethan like a hammer, but the sight before him froze him more. Dozens of red eyes glowed in the distance, the drones crawling fast across the ice, their legs cutting sharp lines into the snow. The hum turned into a roar as they closed in. For a heartbeat, Ethan felt despair, knowing they could not outrun such machines. Koresh leaned close, her voice steady in his ear. "We fight together, human, your weapon and my blade. One strength." Ethan nodded, his fear melting into a hard edge. It did not matter if she was enemy or ally now. She was the only one beside him, and together was the only chance they had. The first drone leapt forward, metal legs slashing. Sensor burning red, Ethan fired, the blast tearing through its head, sparks exploding in the snow. Koresh met another with her blade, cutting deep into its joints, the machine collapsing under her strike. More came, faster, harder, filling the storm-swept ground with iron death. Ethan's breath burned in his chest, each shot shaking his frozen hands. Koresh moved like a storm given shape, her blade flashing, her voice a growl as she cut through steel. The snow turned black with smoke, sparks flashing like fireflies. The world became nothing but noise, gunfire, metal screams, the hiss of frozen wind, and then, for one brief moment, their eyes met in the chaos, 2 enemies, fighting side by side, back to back, their survival bound by blood and fire. Ethan felt the truth strike deeper than fear. This was no accident. No mistake. The bond she spoke of was no superstition. It was real, carved into the ice with every step, every strike, every breath they shared. But the fight was not over. Beyond the smoke, more red eyes glowed. An army of machines stretching into the storm. Ethan's heart sank. But Koresh's voice cut through the dread. Run now, fight later, live to see the next sun. Together, they turned, racing into the storm, the hum of the machines chasing them into the endless white. And Ethan knew the enemy outside was not just the drones, it was the war itself, the storm, and maybe even the bond he could no longer escape. The storm swallowed them once more, but this time the danger was not only the cold behind them. The red glow of drones burned through the snow, dozens of eyes sweeping the plains, their mechanical hums chasing like wolves that never tired. Ethan's lungs burned as he ran, each breath a knife in his chest, his boots sinking deep into the ice with every step. Koresh moved beside him, her stride steady, her blade still in her grip, her body showing no sign of slowing. They stumbled over ridges of broken ice, the ground uneven, sharp cracks spreading like veins beneath their feet. One wrong step and they would fall into the frozen abyss. But slowing meant death at the hands of the machines. The world had become a race between 2 enemies, cold and steel. Ethan's mind screamed that it was hopeless. But Koresh's voice cut through the storm. "There is a beacon," she shouted, her voice harsh against the wind. "South of here, across the canyon. It can call rescue if it still lives, Ethan's heart leapt, hope flaring for the first time since the crash. A signal beacon meant a chance to escape this nightmare, maybe even a way back to human command. But then doubt struck. If the beacon still worked, why had no one else been saved? Why had no help come? He forced the thought away. Hope was fire, and fire meant survival. Then we get there, Ethan said, his voice firm. Whatever it takes, Koresh gave one sharp nod, her amber eyes glowing fierce. Yes, but the canyon is death. Many do not cross, the ground beneath them shook. Snow exploding upward as drones fired beams that cut through ice. Chunks shattered into the air, and Ethan stumbled, falling hard on one knee. Koresh grabbed his arm, pulling him up with strength that surprised him. On your feet, she growled. The storm does not pity the weak. They pushed on, the drones closing. The canyon looming ahead, a jagged scar in the earth. Its walls sharp and frozen, its depth endless. The only way across was a narrow bridge of broken ice, cracked and groaning under the weight of time. Ethan's chest tightened at the sight. That won't hold us, he said. His voice heavy, Koresh's gaze stayed fixed, her tone unshaken. It must. They reached the edge. The roar of drones behind them now a thunder. Koresh stepped onto the ice bridge first, her movements slow, balanced. The surface groaned beneath her weight. Spiderweb cracks racing outward, Ethan followed, each step sending jolts of terror up his spine, the canyon below pulling at him like a mouth ready to swallow. Halfway across, the drones reached the edge. Their glowing eyes fixed on them. One leapt forward, its legs slamming onto the bridge. The ice screaming in protest, Ethan fired, the shot blasting the machine apart. But the recoil nearly threw him off balance. His arms windmilled, his boots slipping until Koresh's hand caught his wrist. Pulling him steady. Focus, she hissed. Do not look down. But Ethan could not stop. The darkness below was endless. A void waiting for his fall. The bridge cracked again, louder. Pieces tumbling into the abyss, Koresh pulled him forward, her strength dragging him when his legs would not move fast enough. At last, they reached the far side, throwing themselves onto solid ground as the bridge behind them shattered completely. The sound echoed like thunder, the canyon swallowing the ice and the drones that had tried to follow. For a moment, silence returned, only their heavy breaths filling the air. Ethan lay on his back, chest heaving. The sky above a dull gray. Koresh stood tall, her gaze sweeping the horizon. There, she said, pointing toward a faint shape rising from the snow in the distance. A tower of metal, broken but standing, half buried by storms, the beacon. Hope surged again in Ethan's chest, but it was fragile as the ice they had just crossed. He pushed himself up, his legs trembling, his heart still racing. Let's move, he said. Koresh gave another nod, her expression unreadable. But her eyes carried a fire that seemed to burn brighter with every step they took together. The journey toward the beacon was slower. Their bodies drained, but each step felt heavier with meaning. The storm whispered around them, and in the silence between, Ethan felt the strange bond pressing closer. It was not only survival that tied them now, it was trust. And though he told himself it was temporary, he knew deep down that every step toward the beacon was also a step deeper into something he could not escape. As the beacon drew closer, Koresh spoke again, her voice low but certain. Survive the canyon, survive the storm. Survive together, like that is the law of mates. Ethan's throat tightened, his mind screaming against her words, but his heart silent because in the end, the truth was clear. He had crossed the bridge not only with her help, but because of her, and that was a bond no canyon could break. The beacon rose before them like a broken monument, half buried under ice, its steel tower bent by storms, its panels cracked and worn. Still, it stood, defiant against the cold, a reminder of a time when someone believed this frozen world could be claimed. Ethan stared at it with a mix of hope and doubt, his breath heavy, his body aching from the canyon crossing. If the beacon still worked, it might call rescue. But if it was dead, then so were they. Koresh walked ahead, her boots crunching into the snow, her golden eyes scanning the tower with caution. She touched the frozen steel with her hand, as if listening to it, her voice low and certain. It still has power, weak but alive, she said. Ethan felt relief flood through him. But it was fragile. Power meant hope, but hope could be a trap too. They moved inside the small outpost beneath the tower, its door broken, its walls filled with ice crystals shining faintly in the weak light. Old human markings were still scratched into the steel. Warnings. Names of soldiers who had once been here. Ethan ran his fingers across them, his throat tight. Humans built this, he whispered. My people tried to hold this world once. Koresh's gaze followed the faded words, but her expression stayed unreadable. And they failed, she said. As did mine. The silence hung heavy, and Ethan turned to face her, his jaw tight. What do you mean? Koresh's eyes narrowed, her voice sharp but not unkind. You think only humans were abandoned here? My clan was sent too, to fight, to claim, to die in the snow when the fleets left us behind. Ethan's heart thudded, anger and confusion crashing inside him. All this time we were told you were monsters, raiders, killers without honor. Koresh stepped closer, her face fierce. And we were told the same of you, human. But here you are, breathing because I saved you, living because I shared my warmth. Tell me, do I look like a monster? Ethan's words failed him. He wanted to say yes, to cling to the hatred drilled into him since training, but her eyes, burning gold in the dim light, told another truth. She was not a monster. She was flesh and blood, scarred and stubborn, as trapped as he was. The hum of the beacon filled the silence. Faint but steady, Ethan turned toward the control panel. Brushing away frost with his gloves, the screen flickered. Weak light blinking, waiting, he tapped a sequence, and the beacon crackled alive, sending a faint signal into the sky. Rescue, he muttered, his chest tight. Someone has to hear this. Koresh's gaze stayed fixed on him, her expression unreadable. And if your people come? She asked, her tone sharp. What will you tell them, human? That you bonded with your enemy? That your life is tied to mine? Ethan froze, his hands shaking above the console. He had not thought of that. If human command found him alive beside her, what would they do? Would they see him as survivors or traitor? The silence grew heavier, broken only by the faint hum of the beacon. Koresh stepped closer, her voice low but fierce. Listen to me, Ethan. They left you here just as they left me. To them we are both expendable. They will not care for your survival. They will not honor what you became in this storm. Ethan wanted to argue, but her words sank into him like the cold itself. He thought of his crew, his command, his orders, and then he thought of the storm, of her arm holding him when death's claws reached close. Without her, he would already be another frozen corpse under the snow. I don't know, he whispered, his voice rough. I don't know what I'll tell them. Koresh's hand brushed his shoulder, not soft but strong, grounding. Then tell them nothing, she said. Tell them you lived, and leave the chains of war behind. You are free now. We are free, her words echoed in his chest. Shaking something loose he had not known was bound. All his life, orders had guided him. Hatred had filled him. Loyalty had chained him. But here on this dead world, none of it mattered. Here, there was only survival. Only her. The beacon's signal pulsed into the sky, fragile, desperate, uncertain. Ethan stood between two paths. Return to the war that abandoned him, or step into a bond that terrified him. Koresh's eyes locked with his, unflinching. You know the truth now. Human, she said. The war is lies, the storm stripped it away. Do not carry their chains anymore. Ethan felt his chest tighten. His breath heavy, he looked at the beacon, then at her, and for the first time he felt the war slipping from his hands. He had been taught that his enemy was less than human, but now, in the frozen silence, he saw her as something more alive, more loyal, more real than anyone who had left him here. And though the beacon called to the sky, he realized the answer he sought was not above, it was here, standing in front of him, golden eyes burning in the cold. Koresh, his enemy, his savior, his bond, and perhaps his only true freedom. The beacon's pulse stretched into the sky, faint but steady, a fragile lifeline against the endless storm. Ethan stood in silence, his breath heavy, his eyes fixed on the flickering light of the console. Every signal it sent carried a question into the frozen heavens. Would someone come? And if they did, what would they see? Beside him, Koresh watched with golden eyes that never blinked, her presence steady and unyielding. They will come, Ethan said softly, as if speaking hope aloud would make it true. Koresh tilted her head, her voice calm but sharp. And when they do, what will you be to them? Human soldier or enemy bonded to me? The words cut deep. Ethan clenched his fists, his mind spinning with images of home, command, orders. The faces of comrades who had trusted him. Would they understand that survival had forced him to bond with her? Would they forgive him for lying so close to the one he had been trained to kill? Koresh stepped closer, her voice steady. To them, you will be a tool, nothing more. They left you here to die. Do not forget that. Ethan looked at her, his chest tight. And what about you? What do your people see if they find us? She gave a bitter smile, sharp as ice. They will see betrayal. They will call me oathbreaker, but I care nothing for their judgment. The storm made me free. The bond made me more. The silence between them grew heavy. Filled with truth neither could escape. Outside, the storm calmed, leaving only the distant crunch of snow shifting, the world too quiet. Then Ethan heard it, faint at first, then clearer. A hum, deeper than drones, steadier than wind. He rushed to the broken doorway, staring into the pale horizon. Lights flickered against the clouds, a ship cutting through the storm. His heart leapt and sank at once. Rescue had come, but rescue carried chains. Behind him, Koresh stepped to his side, her gaze fixed on the growing light. Your people, she said, voice unreadable. Or mine. We will know soon. The ship descended, its engines howling against the snow. Its hull scarred, marked with the insignia of humans. Ethan's chest tightened, memories flooding back, the weight of orders, the sound of marching, the pride of a flag. For a moment, he almost stepped forward, almost raised his hand in salute as he had 100 times before. But then Koresh's presence burned beside him, steady, grounding, a reminder of the storm and the bond he could not deny. The ramp lowered, figures in armored suits stepping out, human soldiers, weapons drawn, their eyes sharp and suspicious. The first one spotted Ethan and froze. Survivor, the soldier called. Identify yourself. Ethan's throat tightened, his voice caught. I'm Ethan Ward, 2nd Fleet, he said, though the words felt heavier than ever. The soldier lowered his weapon slightly, relief flashing in his eyes. Command thought no one lived through the crash, you're lucky. Then his gaze shifted, landing on Koresh, standing tall at Ethan's side, blade still in her hand. His expression hardened instantly. Enemy. He spat, his weapon rising again. Ethan stepped between them without thinking, his body moving before his mind. She's not your enemy, he shouted, his voice echoing against the ice. She saved me. I'm alive because of her. The soldier's eyes widened, disbelief flooding his face. You're protecting her, he growled, after everything they've done after the war. Ethan's heart pounded, the chains of loyalty pulling against the truth in his chest. He looked at Koresh, her golden eyes steady, fierce, unafraid. In that moment he knew. The war was lies, the storm had burned it away. What mattered now was not flags, not orders, but the bond forged in the cold. Yes, Ethan said, his voice strong. I'm protecting her. The soldiers shifted, uneasy, their weapons still raised. Behind them the ship loomed, a promise of return but also a prison of duty. Ethan realized the choice was no longer theirs. It was his. Koresh spoke softly, her voice for him alone. You are free now. Human, but freedom is a path you must take, not one given. Ethan's chest tightened, his mind screaming with the weight of the decision. To step onto the ship meant safety, warmth, a return to command. But it also meant chains, lies. War, to stay with Koresh, meant danger, exile, unknown futures. But it also meant truth, and a bond that felt unbreakable. The storm whispered across the plains as silence hung heavy between soldier and survivor, human and alien, war and freedom. Ethan's hands shook, but his voice was steady as he made his choice. I'm not going back, he said, his words sharp as the cold air. Not without her. The soldiers stared, shocked, uncertain, their weapons still aimed, but their hearts shaken. Koresh's eyes glowed brighter, not with pride, not with victory, but with something deeper. Recognition. The bond was no longer just survival, no longer just ritual. It was choice. It was freedom. It was the beginning of something new. And as the beacon flickered, as the ship loomed, as the storm whispered again, Ethan knew he had broken the chains of war. and whatever came next would not be commanded by fleets or flags. It would be written by them, together, in the cold.